5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, we are here with the very first complete TMCJ podcast. Did I say podcast? I already fucked up. Podcast.
Good job.
That is a good christening to the beginning of this thing.
Start as you mean to go on, as they say.
I think neither of us had any delusions that this was going to be something other than a shit show. But
Well, no, it's a bit of fun, isn't it?
so if you're listening to this on any day that isn't next Saturday, the 30th, 29th? I don't know what day it is.
Yeah,
but
sure, 30th.
If you're listening to this during the week, you're probably listening to one of the individual segments. So the plan is, in this podcast final form, at least on YouTube, is to publish the podcast in 4 parts. So segment 1 will be published on Monday, segment 2 on Wednesday, segment 3 on Friday, and then the whole podcast in its entirety will be published on Saturday as one video. The idea being, you know, if people want to just listen to something bite-sized, it's available in that kind of format. But if they want to listen to the entire thing, or they heard one bit and thought they wanted to hear the whole thing, they can, you know, listen to it on Saturday.
Yep, and then they can go to therapy on Sunday.
Yeah, that's what that's what Sunday's for. Just quietly crying.
And finding God. Wait, is that a Sunday thing or is that a Saturday thing?
It depends. So it's a Sunday thing if you're a Christian. I think it's a Saturday thing if you're Jewish.
Right, okay.
So we've already gotten into religion, and I haven't even brought up the first topic.
Yeah, sorry. Go on.
It's fine. So
You're the media master.
I have, for topics, the first segment, what we're in now, I have 3 topics that kind of have one overarching theme, and it's really one topic. It's media having aged or not aged well. So, like, with games, I mean, this is easy. It's games that have poor graphics. Are they still fun to play? Are they still interesting after years of playing through them? Movies, you know, did cheesy special effects hold up? Is, like, the writing good enough or something like that? And the same thing with books. Like, books, you kind of have to look at a longer time frame, but along the same lines. So,
Well, I was going to say the first thing I think about, and ironically it's not something that I've actually played myself, so I don't know, it's going to be tenuous at best. But you remember when Resident Evil 2 got remastered?
I do, yeah.
That was hugely popular for a while, and I was far too young when it originally came out. I've looked at the remastered version, as in watched people playing it, and man, it looks pretty cool, especially the fact that it has a mechanic that you don't really see in any other game, which is one constant invincible enemy.
So I personally never played that game. I was never into horror games. I was old enough at the time. I think I was either in middle school or high school when it came out, and I had a friend who did play it. And yeah, I think I watched, you know, people play it at his house, and but I never personally played it. I'm familiar with the core concept of the game, having seen plenty of videos about it when the remaster did come out. I like that idea, though. That idea of having... You're not so much... It's an enemy that you can't defeat. It's just an immovable force. The enemy at that point, I think, becomes an obstacle in the game.
Yeah. It's got... Basically, it's... If you can imagine Slender Man, as I'm sure we all can.
Yeah.
If you were like thick. If you were a thick boy. And he walks slowly.
That is the
sense. You can hear him coming before he appears. You hear his boots stomping around the corridors. And he doesn't run, he doesn't move fast. He just constantly follows you throughout, like, half the game. You just have to keep moving around, otherwise he will catch up to you.
That is a sentence I don't think I ever thought I would hear in my life. If you can imagine Slender Man, except he's a thick boy.
Well,
oh boy.
I'm sure there's fan art of it somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, in that case, remasterings, that's, you know, this is probably going to come through on the mic, but I'm pouring more tea. I have a little teapot here, which is Um, but and a small cup, which normally is a very good way to keep my tea warm. At this point, it's a very good way to have liquid sounds coming through my microphone.
I can't hear it, so I think you're fine. But anyway, go on.
But thinking about remasterings and stuff, one thing I played very recently was the Final Fantasy VII remake, and that's not a remastering. That one they legitimately remade the game entirely.
Is it actually Final Fantasy VII then?
Yes, so it's the story, but instead of here, how to describe this? So, if the original game, for those that don't know, was just a multi-disc epic on the PlayStation 1. It was 3 discs long. You played, it probably was something like 120 hours, if not more, of gameplay. And the first disc, well, not even the whole first disc, about 2/3 of the way through the first disc is where the remake ends. So what they did was they are completely remaking the game, fully voice-acted cutscenes, gorgeous graphics. Like, the gameplay is entirely different. The first one was a turn-based RPG. This one is still an RPG, but it's a hack-and-slash RPG.
I see. So the narrative is the same.
The narrative's the same.
The game itself is different.
Yeah, they've added some nuance to it. They've added a couple segments and, like, some stuff that wasn't in the first one, simply because, I guess, it was either cut or they didn't have room. So the remake is 2/3 of the way through it's probably about a quarter of the first game. But it plays out for about, I think I beat it in something like 40 hours.
Right. Yeah, growing up, Final Fantasy was always kind of more my brother's thing. I didn't play it too much. I remember on the DS and the PSP we had a few Final Fantasy games, and they were pretty darn fun. It was the ones that were like turn-based. And I loved the little figures, especially the. God, I'm gonna butcher all of the characters, but there were like some guards who had like duck faces, except they looked like cool. They're like cool orange ducks with awesome armor, and I always wanted them because it was just a completely random creature made up.
That is one of the things that this is going to lead into a topic I have written down for the second segment today. So we'll probably call it back
creatures?
to this. Yes, duck creatures. No, I'm talking about, like, those older Final Fantasy games.
Okay. Yeah.
There's
Tactics I played. Sorry.
Yeah, Final Fantasy Tactics. I was about to say that sounds like FF Tactics. For me, the first Final Fantasy game I played was Final Fantasy X. And
really, that's pretty late. Wasn't that awful?
It was on the PS2. Yeah, that one came out in early 2000s. I wasn't big into the Final Fantasy games. I played, so saying that's the first one I played is a little bit that's kind of not true. I had a friend who had Final Fantasy VII for the PlayStation 1, but I didn't have a PlayStation 1 as a kid.
Right, it was the first one that you owned and got to play through properly, as opposed to just having a one-off kind of thing.
Exactly. Maybe. Yeah. I had a Nintendo 64 as a kid.
Yeah. I watched a video on Reddit recently of some wife bought their husband a Nintendo 64, and the look on his face was just priceless. There's definitely a generation.
Yeah.
That is just like, oh my god, the Nintendo 64 was the best thing since sliced bread.
I am gonna circle it back to the topic though.
Yes, sorry.
No. The Nintendo 64 was a very good place to circle it back, because that is like the very first era of, like, 3D polygonal graphics. So you have some games, I think on the N64, that while the gameplay and stuff still hold up very well, the graphics are a little painful to look at. And I'm going to piss people off saying this, but I think Mario 64 is a good example of this. Like,
really? Yeah. Okay, go on.
I mean, Mario's nose is like a square in that game, and he just it looks a bit rough, but it can still be fun. But I think you need to have that nostalgia factor. I personally know I do, but I don't want.
I mean, by that same logic, though, everyone knows about the low polygon count of Lara Croft in Tomb Raider, but that was that. You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, she was very well endowed.
Yes, um, that almost became like a meme, as it were, on its own
So
in
much
later
so
years.
that they put a like a fake cheat code into one of the games that like you could take her top off with a
Really? Oh my
certain.
god!
They said you could take her top off with a certain button combination, but if you did, she exploded and you lost, and you
Oh
had to.
yeah, I've actually heard about that.
Yeah, so it was the developers just messing with people. Like they
Oh, that's
leaned into it.
brilliant.
It was hilarious.
Yeah.
But again, that was a PlayStation 1 game, so I never got to play it myself.
No, yeah. Again, that was. I mean, I played lots of I loved the PlayStation One far more than PlayStation Two, but yeah, a lot of the shooting games at that time were
Mm.
above my age range. I was
Yeah.
playing Penguin games and Bust a Move, if you know what that was.
Yep. Oh my. So not only do I know what Bust a Move was, so it's no mystery that I think I've told you this before, but my mother was a bit of a gamer as well.
Oh,
Um,
yes,
to
yes.
the point where when we had
Halo Master, I've heard.
not so much, but she did quite embarrassingly for one of my friends beat him in a match in high school. We paired him up with his girlfriend who wasn't very good at Halo, but neither was my mother, and we paired my mother up who had never played before with one of my friends who's actually quite good at the game. And everyone is like behind her, like coaching her along, and she actually managed to to kill him a few times, and it was hilarious.
Yeah.
Um, but no, in the NES era, she actually had her own NES, and I had an N64, but she had the game Bust a Move for the N64, and
Yeah.
those were her style of games. Like she played Centipede, she played Bust a Move, and I can't remember what she had on the NES, but she played a few games on that too. But it was much more those like arcadey puzzle. Oh, Pac-Man. She had Pac-Man.
I could never get along with Pac-Man. But yeah, like even my grandfather used to play Bust a Move with me and my brother. Like
Yeah.
it was that much of a literally anyone could play it. It was just pretty pictures and smiles.
Yeah, you go back. I think thinking about like games that have held up. I think when you go back to that 2D era, the arcadey kind of game, because they were trying to appeal to as many people as possible,
Yeah.
rather than trying to push technology. And back then, I think you go back to any of those games, pick them up again, and start playing. They're still just enjoyable.
Mm.
I mean,
I mean, I think that's.
look at Tetris. We're still playing that.
Oh yeah. I mean, I never played Tetris as a kid because I didn't really understand it. I couldn't fit them together quickly as a kid. But there was definitely a point where I started playing Tetris and Minesweeper. Got really into Minesweeper. Holy moly!
Oh God.
Which is just like the saddest thing. But it's weirdly you have to use your brain if you want to be really good at it.
Yeah, exactly.
Or it can just be a chill thing.
Yeah, you can either take it at a decent pace, or you could try to go for a good time and something like that.
Mm.
Yeah, I think the two first games that I played a lot of, because so my very first video game console period was a Nintendo Entertainment System, like the
Alright.
original one, and I got it as a hand-me-down for one of my cousins out in the Midwest.
A
He had,
SNES.
no. He got a SNES, so I got his old NES.
Right,
The Nintendo Entertainment System came out in 1985.
name.
Yeah, the original one. The
I mean, bear in mind that was like 12 years before I was born.
Well, yeah, it was 3 years before I was born. So, but it was. Here. Let me fill airtime while I send you a picture of this so that you know.
Okay.
You probably have heard of it. But
Right.
you.
I mean, I
Yeah.
had a. Well, my brother got a Nintendo 64 when I must be about 12 or something. and we didn't have many games, but we had Mario Kart on it. And I remember playing it as a 12-year-old. I didn't really appreciate fine things. I could appreciate a game that was so old, but still played so well.
Yeah.
The Mario Kart. I mean, Mario Kart's timeless, I think.
Mario.
Although, actually, these days, I don't think it's as good as it used to be. I think they've added too many stupid things to it, and it's kind
Too
of
many
lost
bells
it.
and whistles. There's a lot of games that have kind of fallen into that kind of trap.
Mm.
And I think that is one of the reasons like older games tend to actually like really older games tend to hold up better because they were simpler. Like they had a very like efficient and fun gameplay loop that you could go through over and over again and actually enjoy. But bringing it back to the NES, so I just sent you a picture of what it looked like.
Crikey, that's
Yeah.
that reminds me of my like first computer, the white box.
Yeah. So I had that. It was a hand-me-down from one of my cousins out in the Midwest. He had got a SNES, and that was that predated the SNES. So he gave me that and his older games. So my first games were the original Mario Brothers, like, and Duck Hunt, which was where you had the laser light gun and you could shoot ducks on the TV screen.
Did they remaster Duck Hunt? Because I know Duck Hunt, but I don't think I ever knew it came from a game this old, from a console this old.
Yeah, it was one of the originals, so I don't know if they remastered it. They must have, because it was an insanely popular game.
Was it a 2D side-scroller or
Nope. So the way
hunting game?
So Mario was a 2D side-scroller platforming game, but you know that one. Duck Hunt. So what it was you had like a field of polygon grass at the bottom there, and ducks would fly up out of the grass and zigzag across the screen kind of slowly, and you had a light gun that you would point at the TV, and when you pulled the trigger, it would read the pixels around where you were pointing and see if it was the duck. The ducks were very different colored from the background.
Yeah.
And you would either hit them or not hit them. And the 5 or 6 year old me was enthralled with this game. I played quite a bit of it. I mean, you could always
guns online.
you could always cheese the game by sticking the gun right next to the screen, but it was more satisfying to be further back and actually accurate.
Yeah.
This has become the nostalgia segment.
Well, yeah. I was never a fan of. Well, I don't know. I think my parents weren't a massive fan of me using hunting games, that kind of thing. I think there's probably a cultural difference between here and America, possibly.
Maybe just a little bit of one.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, I never really played that kind of game. I think I wouldn't enjoy it now, not because I wouldn't dislike it because of the morals of it. I would think I would dislike it because I would not have the patience to do the whole slog through a jungle, use your special whistle, take aim at a very particular part, and if you miss, you have to chase it through.
Oh, are you talking about like literal hunting?
No, well, no, I'm talking about that's what hunting games are.
Oh, yeah. The modern hunting. But I think that goes back to what we were just talking about, that like games in general have kind of become overburdened with like so much extra crap. Like in the like that game that I just described, duck flies up, you shoot it. To make it more difficult, now 2 ducks are flying up and you have to shoot both of them. And there's a certain time limit. You get a score, but for how quickly you can shoot them. If you miss, you lose points. You have a certain amount of ammo, and that was it. That was the entire game, and it was fun because of that. Now,
these days,
like you're saying, it's you stalk them through the woods. You use a certain kind of whistle. You have to worry about what kind of rifle you're using. Is there bullet drop off? Like all of this. Some of it.
And there's so many kinds of bullet drop off in so many different games. Maddening.
Yeah.
How many different ways a bullet can fly.
All right. So before because we could talk about like do this with games forever. I do want to briefly touch on movies and books along this same line about how they've kind of what older ones that still hold up versus newer ones that, or what am I trying to say, that don't actually hold up, that people will watch and go like, wow, that looks like shit. I don't remember it looking that shit. I'm gonna start with. Do you want to start with movies or books?
Well, I've got one that's both.
Okay,
I was
go
going
for
to say,
it.
do you want to start with one, or shall I just launch it?
Nope, go for it. Go for it. I got one in mind, but I'll go after you.
And I think it's one that you'll have strong opinions about, because I think everyone has.
Yep.
The Hobbit.
Okay.
Brilliant book. I read it as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Then several years later, the film came out, and it was very upsetting.
Really? Okay. So I
not
personally, I saw the movies first, and then I listened to the audiobooks. So I never actually read the books, but this was all later. Like, this was in the last few years. So I saw the movies. God, it was in the mid 2010s. So like 2014, 2015, 2016 kind of time frame. And the book I listened to on audiobook. It was one of the things I got to listen to while I was like traveling. So if I was on a plane or something like that, so it would have been like in the last couple of years that I listened to the audiobooks. I've gone back and actually watched the movies before. I did enjoy them. The books, I will say, having listened to both The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy on audiobook now, there's quite a lot of just nothing happening in those books.
Yeah? You think so?
I really do think there's quite a few chapters where they're literally just like walking and walking and walking, and then they have a little bit of character dialogue, and then they're walking and describing the beautiful scenery. It's a very, I mean, if that's what you're looking, you might, it gives the impression of a long epic journey, and like, and there's that mystical and magical kind of element that goes along with it. And if that's what you're looking for, then the books do it. The books are kind of, I think, a masterclass in it. I, having seen the movies first, was a little bored at times, and it was a bit of a slog getting through them. But tell me, no, I want to hear your thoughts now that I've kind of given you, because me not having read them as a child and having read the books after I watched the movies, that's my take on them.
Yeah, well, much like any books that have been turned into movies, of course they have to cut things out. But I feel like they really did just cut out all the moments when something wasn't dying. You understand what I mean?
I can, yeah.
It's great to have these amazing action scenes, and I love them. But you have to have, dare I say it, like, the lows to have the highs. That doesn't mean lows in it being a bad moment to have a good moment, so much as when they are passing through those peaceful glens and they're seeing this amazing thing that they just stop to look at or whatever, and then you have them being captured by the trolls, and then the whole sequence where, spoilers for the movie and the book.
I mean, it's a Lord of the Rings.
I mean, yeah, it's there's
going to be trolls.
The way that the trolls defeated, and
yeah,
I don't know, it was such a beautiful piece of work, I think.
Okay,
and maybe it was just the fact that it was a book. I think it was better laid out as a book. I don't think it needed to be made into a film.
Okay, so I kind of maybe, let me organize my thoughts for a sec. I see what you're saying there, and I actually agree with most of those points. There were parts in the book. So there were parts I know the parts you're talking about, like how the trolls were defeated and whatnot. I did like the book version better. And you're right. In the movies, they did like cut out a lot of that downtime just so that like but because the book was so long, I think they had to cut out almost all of the downtime, so it seems like they're going to like action
Yeah,
to
they have
action
to
to
fill
action to action, and you do need that downtime to appreciate those peak moments of action. But when I think of the movie, the action scenes are actually some of the least memorable parts for me, which I think probably says a lot about why I did end up going through the entire book, despite the kind of slow bits kind of dragging on for a little bit for me. Like my favorite part of all of the Hobbit movies, my absolute favorite, is at the very, very beginning, where all the dwarves are coming into his house,
Yeah.
and the like all the singing and the eating and just like, and then at the very end when they're singing that kind of like sad like song about the mountain and everything.
Wonderful, yeah.
So that's not a big action piece in the book or the movie, but I really, really enjoyed just that whole sequence in the movie. That's something I actually preferred in the movie compared to the book. But
Yes.
the part you're thinking about, the one where the trolls have spoiler alert, the trolls have captured some people from the book. I'll keep it relatively spoiler free. Have captured some people, and one of the main characters has to think of a clever way to get them out. I do definitely prefer the way they handled that in the book versus the movie. Because the book was more cleverness. The movie was more Hollywood. If that makes sense.
The music that you brought up, I won't lie. I'm not sure what the official song was officially called, but the "Fire on the Mountain" song.
Yeah.
I was singing that for weeks.
Oh my god, yeah.
They did that so well.
The thing is, one thing I really like, because I did listen to an audiobook. They actually picked out a guy that did the audiobook reading. Not only had a wide range of voices he could do for the characters, he could actually sing. So he sang the songs that were in the book. The guy doing the audiobook reading, which I think added a lot to me, listening through it. It would have sucked if the guy couldn't hold a tune in a bucket.
Yeah, and one of the other things that kind of surprised, I surely don't want to stick on the Hobbit for too long, but they got to the mountain with the dragon.
Yeah.
So much faster. Like, in my opinion, it felt like the book was 2/3 them getting to the mountain, and then maybe a third or less actually in the mountain. That's what I can kind of remember it from the book.
So they go on.
Did
go
like
on.
the whole journey in one film, and then spent 2 whole films just in the mountain.
I know what you're talking about, and this is why I think I remember so much more of the very first movie and so much less of the other two. It's almost like they decided after the first movie to make it a trilogy. Because if they were going to make it a trilogy, because the book was only one book. Like, The Hobbit was one book. The Lord of the Rings trilogy actually was 3 books, and they had 3 movies.
Mm-hmm.
The Hobbit was one book that they made into 3 movies, and it was a shorter book, I think, than the later Lord of the Rings book. Some fan out there of Lord of the Rings is going to be pissed at me for saying that. I might not be right. But either way, it's one book that they chunked out into 3 movies. And if they were going to make it that long, like have 3 movies to tell that one book, they could have kept in some more of the subtlety that you're talking about. So, but instead, they like made the first movie and they chunked everything down to make the journey faster. And then when they got to the mountain, they're like, "Oh shit, we want to make a 3rd movie too." So they had to stretch that out. I think it was poorly planned. Is a good way to put that. And the people doing it were people who didn't necessarily understand books, and maybe they worked on too many big Hollywood movies.
Yeah, you said you had some other books that were.
I had one book in particular.
Topic.
Yeah, one book in particular that I was thinking of. And again, this is one I listened to on audiobook, so keep that in mind. But The Count of Monte Cristo. Have you ever read it?
Heard of it, not read it.
It's a pretty old one. It came out in like 1848 or something like that. So a lot of the references and things are dated in it. I personally really enjoyed the book, but it's another one. It kind of shows how writing at the time was different than now, because they spend tons and tons of time talking about, political situation,
Yeah.
peerage ranks and like the way nobility were dealing with each other and just in idle conversation. Just it literally was like slices of these people's everyday life, and they use that to characterize the characters. It's one of those things that I think in a modern book would annoy people,
Oh, is
but
it?
because the book was at the period, I think, and a lot of the references don't make any sense to modern readers because they spend so much time going through them. I think it actually
Mm.
helps to understand what the hell's going on in a lot of sections. But I'll admit there were times going through the book where I literally just zoned out and was listening, and it's just like
Yeah.
I understand that this character's talking to this other character. I don't give a crap what they're saying. But the book itself, very very good.
Yes. That's good. Well, I'm sure you remember a short while ago. I was reading quite a few of the older books
Hmm.
because I read through Phantom of the Opera, and that was a brilliant book. I would recommend that book.
Yeah, I've
That
never
was sorry.
I've never gone through it, so yeah, that's
Ah,
something that I need to. And I remember we talked about this at the time.
that was written in 1909,
Hmm.
so a bit later. But and I enjoyed that so much. I went on to read the Three Musketeers, another excellent book. A little bit longer, and I feel, but and then I went on to because I heard about it so much, and especially from Duncan
Hmm.
in the server,
Yeah.
Les Miserables, which
See,
is actually uh, written 1 year after the Count of Monte Cristo, apparently.
I didn't realize it was a book. Like I knew it was a
Yeah,
musical, and I've obviously seen the movie. I love the movie. I didn't realize it
I've
was a
not seen
book
the
as
movie.
well.
Yes, the 1845 it was released, and so I was listening to an audiobook
Hmm.
because when you get buses everywhere all the time, it's a good
Yeah.
thing to do. The opening section, I never got past the opening section because the opening section is so many hours long, and I'm sorry for people who love it, but it is dreary as all hell. It follows like a priest.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm assuming
who's
that.
just a really good priest. He's a really nice guy. He helps out people in his village, and it goes on like that for hours.
Is it the priest that helps out Jean Valjean?
Yes, Jean
Okay.
Valjean arrives after X number of hours as um, as this criminal hooligan that no one wants to be associated with,
And then the
and
priest.
the priest lets him into his house.
Yes. Okay. So that's so basically it starts off like okay, so it starts off that's interesting. It starts off following the priest because he's a relatively minor character in both the movie and the
Right.
musical.
Okay.
Maybe that's why.
Oh, fudging hell! And there's so many names it throws at you, and I'm terrible at remembering
Oh
names.
my god, that was the problem I had again. Going back, that was the problem I had with Count of Monte Cristo. There were tons of character names, like tons
Yeah,
of them. So another
I mean,
book.
maybe if they were like modern day names, like it would have been at the time, then
Yeah.
they'd be more memorable. But when they're saying French names from the 1900s, it's just like in one ear out the
So many fucking noises are popping in the background of this. I really need to
other.
be a little bit less professional. Xbox, turn off.
More professional, do you mean?
No, I mean less professional because at this point it's a shit show. So just deal.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, that's fine. I think the lawnmower's going to be starting soon anyway. Outside.
All right. So now that the Xbox has been shut up, so that was honestly a problem that I had with Count of Monte Cristo 2 was again just names and names and names. And by the end of the book, I was starting to figure out who some of the people were. But going through it, I probably needed like a flow chart to remember who all of these
Yeah.
people were.
And it's not so bad when you're listening to an audiobook because generally they put on voices quite often
Yeah, yeah, and you can
for
kind
different
of
characters.
yeah.
Yeah.
But when there's 38 characters in the story, then the guy's gonna run out of voices.
Yeah.
So another book that I own a physical copy of, and I also tried going through it with the audiobook, and I failed both times to finish it, was War and Peace. It's another one of those classic books. It's set in like Tsarist Russia after, I want to say, either the Franco-Prussian War or before it.
Right. Do you have a general date?
Like 1800s. The book
Hmm.
came out, I think, in the late 1800s, and it was set earlier. I honestly, it's about like the war and peace between these great nations and how it
Yeah.
focuses again
I've
mostly
definitely
on the
heard of it.
yeah. It's a book that I've heard is a classic. It's one of these big, like, thick books about just politics and strategy and these
Right.
like I don't know how people I'm courtly politics. That's the word I'm looking for. And
Okay.
I've gotten probably about, so the audiobook is broken up into two parts because the thing is absolutely massive, and it's actually sold in two parts on the audiobook form because it's so massive. It's just
Wow.
basically like it's something like 70 hours long.
Jeebus.
I I may be exaggerating that, but it's a ridiculously like long number of hours. The physical
Yeah.
book is like a fucking dictionary. The thing is
Oh,
enormous.
quick thing. I just looked because I got Audible up on my phone.
Hmm.
Les Mis is 62 hours long.
Yeah, so I'm probably not exaggerating when I say this thing is 70
Probably
hours.
not.
But it's an absolutely enormous book, and I was enjoying it. But it's something that you need to listen to continuously because just like those other two books, they throw characters at you, they throw names at you, they throw the like politics and locations and all these details that are, I think, important, but they're hard to keep track of everything if you like listen to the book for say 2 hours on Monday and then like 3 hours
God,
on
yeah, I know what you mean.
Saturday, and then if you're listening to it every day, then you can probably keep track of it. But if you take a break in between it, you're gonna lose track and go like, who the hell was this guy again?
Mm,
Like, I and I think that's something that has changed moving to like a modern setting with things. A lot of media now is more streamlined, and I think there's definitely an audience for that old style where you have tons of detail, tons of characters, and just this
mm.
massive world. But
A rich atmosphere.
yeah, but it's presented very differently now, and I think it's done so for a reason because a lot of people, for better or for worse, have a hard time parsing through all of that like thick detail and information. So that's, I think we're actually coming to 38 minutes here, so I think that's a good place for us to end the first segment. So I'm going to do kind
Hmm.
of a little, like I said at the beginning, going to do a bit of a soft outro here. This, if you're listening on Monday the 24th, this is where this segment is going to end. But if you're listening to the complete thing next Saturday, then you're going to be able to just keep listening, and there's just going to be a little bit of a click because I'm going to turn the recording off and then turn it back on again for segment number
Hmm.
2.
So I can get more coffee. Good God.
I need a little bit more tea as well. All right.
Yep.
Thank you for listening, and if you're listening to the full thing, you'll hear us in like 2 seconds.